Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today I've got a full tank review for you on this. It's the A43 BP, and no, BP doesn't stand for Battle Pass, it stands for Black Prince, which is already in the game as a Tier 7 tech tree heavy tank. However, this vehicle is a Tier 6 tank. Much like when Wargaming take a Tiger, a tech tree Tier 7, dump it down to Tier 6 and call it a Tiger 131, it's pretty good for its tier because its armor actually works with that kind of better matchmaking that you'll have when you take the same armor model and drop it down a tier. Much like that, this version of the Black Prince at Tier 6 works as well. This is a premium tank that will be released today in celebration of Tank Fest. Available in-game for gold at 4,500. And in today's video, I'm going to let you know whether A, is this tank any good, and B, is it worth that 4,500 price tag. So Wargaming seems to be on a little bit of a blitz here with Tier 6 premium tanks going inside the game. We just had the Crocodile go in from the Battle Pass, which you can get completely for free by just grinding out 2,500 Battle Pass points down the British chapter. And now we've got the A43 BP going into the game as well, which kind of now competes with the TOG. Can you believe we've got 3 British Tier 6 premium heavy tanks now? And actually, when I think about it, we've got so many as well. When you think about the FV201, although that's at Tier 7 and nobody really plays that. As well as the Carnarvon Action 10, the Caliban, the Charlemagne, the Crusher, and the Gonzalo as well. Wow, it's like British heavy tank paradise. But I digress. Let's focus on the A43 BP and whether it holds up. It's interesting that this vehicle is the same tier now as the Churchill Crocodile, which is the one that I'm going to be comparing in the middle, and then the infamous TOG too. So immediately we notice that the Crocodile has by far the best damage per minute here, with the TOG in second place and the A43 Black Prince quite far behind. 1,700 damage per minute is not good, especially when you take into account that these vehicles do not have high alpha damage at 150. However, it does have the same gun as the TOG and the same gun as its bigger brother at Tier 7, the Black Prince, so it does get nice penetration of 171 on its standard rounds and 239 on its gold rounds, meaning that when you even meet Tier 8 tanks, that is more than enough to go through the front of pretty much most Tier 8s that you're going to meet. Gun handling wise, the A43 BP is in a bit of a bad spot in my opinion. Its aim time of 2.5 seconds means that you never really truly feel that you fully aim as quickly as you would want to, and the 0.37 accuracy is worse than the Crocodile and the TOG too. Its gun handling as well is not great, especially when you turn the turret with 0.23 turret traverse, so I would definitely recommend Snapshot on this vehicle. And the movement dispersion, while it's better than the TOG, it's still not great. 8 degrees of gun depression, however, absolutely destroys the Churchill Crocodile in this comparison, but again, not quite as good as a TOG on a ridgeline. But I'd rather go hull down in an A43 if I can make 8 degrees of gun depression work than the TOG, because everyone knows how awful the TOG's armor is. So mobility-wise, the A43 BP is like the Black Prince used to be, limited at 20 kilometers an hour rather than 25, which is the new top speed limit of the Black Prince. And boy, do I feel it. Driving around in this thing, I do feel sluggish. Now, not nearly as sluggish as a TOG, for example, but even with a turbo just going around at like 24, 25 kilometers an hour in this tank, it doesn't really feel like I get into the combat nearly as quickly as I would want to. However, the vehicle's power to weight ratio is a decent 12, but its ground resistances are worse than the other 2 tanks in this comparison, which kind of balance that out a little bit, although this definitely feels faster than a TOG. So now onto the armor of the A43 BP, and it's actually really good news for this tank. 154 at the front of the hull and the turret, 95 on the side, means that this vehicle has similar armor to the Crocodile. However, only similar in raw values and not similar at all with regards to how the turret actually performs. Let's do a quick comparison between these 2 tanks, and you'll notice that the Black Prince has by far the better turret armor with lots of mantlet protection here and space protection, giving it some areas of 300 millimeters of protection. The side of the turret up to 300 as well, 200 there. And this top bar, it can be overmatched by 120 millimeter caliber guns, but that's not nearly as bad as the Churchill, which only has 20 millimeters of roof armor, which will get overmatched by 61 millimeter caliber guns. The key to surviving in the A43 BP is to over-angle this thing's hull. If you do so, this armor on the side here is still 200 millimeters thick. That's great against Tier 4, Tier 5, and Tier 6 tanks, and it's only the Tier 7s and the Tier 8s that are going to cause an issue there. And if you do that as well, your front plates actually become 170 millimeters thick, meaning that you're going to ricochet most shells. Now, you do create a little bit of a vulnerability in here that your opponents will be able to hit, but if you go forwards and backwards, then this tank can still be quite an awkward thing to be able to pinpoint for equal and lower tier tanks. And so this gives the A43 BP a tremendous advantage over the TOG with regards to how its armor works. However, it's got 1,000 hit points, which is pretty disappointing for this tank. Significantly lower than the Churchill Crocodile, and massively lower than the dramatic TOG, which is one of the most healthy tanks in the game. When you also factor in that the TOG has preferential matchmaking and never has to meet tier 8s, unlike the A43 BP, I'd say all in all, I'd probably feel more durable in a bad matchup in a TOG, just managing to take the hits. But if I'm in a good matchup, man, the A43 BP armor can really work out. Crew skills wise, the A43 BP will be a good trainer for your Super Conqueror crew with a standard commander, gunner, driver, radio operator, and loadout. So that means that you will actually have to train up a radio operator for this vehicle if you don't have many of the British heavy tanks. But if you have one of the Churchills or the TOG 2 or the Excelsior, you will have a radio operator which will fit right in here. Crew skills wise, you want to focus on Brothers in Arms, repairs, then recon for your commander. All of the rest of them are pretty much optional. For your gunner, I'd recommend Brothers in Arms, repairs, snapshot, deadeye, then focus on things like firefighting if you're not using a fire extinguisher with designated target armorer, and you don't even really need concealment on this vehicle as you're a heavy tank and you're going to be getting stuck into close quarters combat. For your driver, Brothers in Arms, repairs. Then I'd recommend things like clutch braking and off-road driving to improve the mobility of this vehicle. Then focus on your gun handling with smooth ride, and then try and reduce the amount of fires that you're going to have. For your radio operator, super easy. Brothers in Arms, repairs, situational awareness, and then your competitive after that, firefighting, and it doesn't really matter. For your loader, I would recommend Brothers in Arms, repairs. Then I would take safe stowage and adrenaline rush, because the AP and the APCR rounds on this tank, they're not really too situational. You just want to load the one that you need to penetrate the enemy tank, and the vehicle reloads so quickly anyway. It's really not the biggest of deals. So all in all, this vehicle has a really low pressure on its crew, so it's perfect for anyone who wants to be competitive pretty quickly, at least until Wargaming implement Crew 2.0, right? Equipment-wise on this tank, really simple. Durability, gun rammer, and turbo will sort you out on pretty much every map that you're going to play. If you must have a second build, maybe you want to end up dropping maybe the durability device for either vents or maybe in a conjunction with coated optics for some of those longer range maps. But really, you need to focus on the close quarters combat on this tank. You need the turbo to get to it. You need the durability device because this vehicle has one of the worst aspects of it, and that is that the tracks run over hull armor, so people can actually shoot you straight here in the tracks, and not only will it track your vehicle, also damage you as well. It's one of the worst things about the Churchill design, and so you absolutely utterly want to do everything that you can to avoid getting tracked with that durability device. Field mods wise on this tank, I'd recommend all-terrain suspension, although you might want to go the other way if you're getting tracked a lot, but remember this will make your ground resistances very much worse. Then I'd focus on the accuracy, I'd take the view range, and that's about it. Let's get stuck into some gameplay. Okay, so first up we are rolling out on Karelia inside a very nice matchup. Now, look, I'm not actually going to feature any high-tier games here because this vehicle, it just really doesn't do very well against high-tier tanks. What am I going to do? Show you, hopefully, trying to play like a support vehicle for something else. Try and latch onto one of your tier 7 heavies, latch onto one of your tier 8, extend their hit points, flank, try and get some shots in, load the gold to be able to compensate because you're down a couple of tiers. So use that 39 millimeters of gold pen, and that's how you play this tank. These vehicles are just all about, in those scenarios, just holding down your W key, getting into a position, and grinding out your opponents. That's what you got to do. It's really simple. It's a very low skill floor kind of tank, and it doesn't really have the highest of skill ceiling as well. It's just pretty much just get stuck in, go after your opponents, expect to lose hit points, which kind of sucks when you only have 1,140 of them, even with a durability device inside the durability slot, and then pretty much just hold down your mouse button and hope that the enemies die before you do. That is what this vehicle is about. However, when you're in a nice matchup, I really want to show you just how different this hull feels than when it is at tier 7 on the Black Prince. You don't really need that much of an imagination to figure out how much better a vehicle is if you move it down a tier. It's like giving it preferential matchmaking. If you take a Black Prince and you make it a top tier tank against tier 6s, well, we all know that the Black Prince does well when it's top tier at tier 7. Well, it's in a phenomenal position now that it's down at tier 6, considering it's got an identical armor layout. Now, I think Wargaming did do a good job with this vehicle by making sure that they didn't make it able to go at 25, because I think if this vehicle had gone at 25, I think it would have been too powerful. So making it this slow, lumbering heavy that doesn't really have wild damage per minute like the Black Prince does at tier 7, and it's not fast now. Well, relatively fast like the Black Prince is these days with its 25 kilometers an hour top speed before you manage to get a turbo on it. I think Wargaming have done a pretty good job of making this tank feel almost like a super heavy in a matchup like this. But I think what a lot of people will end up getting frustrated by in this vehicle is just how matchmaking dependent this tank is. When you get into a game like this, you will be bouncing left, right, and center, and your opponents, they just don't really feel like they can do much against you, at least reliably. However, every time you get into a matchup against only tier 6s, or if you're in a matchup against tier 7s or tier 8s, there can be issues. There really can be issues, let me tell you. But at least, unlike the Black Prince, you never have to get into those scenarios where you're having to fight against tier 9s. And yeah, good luck trying to play a Black Prince against E75, right? The only thing I will say about this tank is I did notice the hit points. When your armor starts to fall apart, and it will fall apart against tier 7s, it will fall apart against tier 8s, and it also will fall apart against knowledgeable tier 6 players who fire gold against you, then very quickly this vehicle does not feel like it's very fun to play. But just look at this. We're just plowing through, we're sitting in the open, we're bouncing all of these tanks left, right, center. Luckily, there's only one or a couple of gold rounds that have managed to hit our vehicle so far. This thing truly does feel like a super heavy in this kind of a scenario. And so for that, I mean, hands down to Wargaming for effectively just cloning a vehicle, dropping it down a tier, and making it feel a lot different to this tank does at tier 7. Now, to be able to make sure this tank is balanced at tier 6, of course, they've destroyed the damage per minute down to 1,700. And not increasing that top speed limit as to what the Black Prince used to. Keeping the Black Prince, this tank's speed at the same as what the Black Prince used to have at 20, it definitely makes it feel like it's frustrating. And there's quite a few scenarios where you push through and you have these awesome games where you just push through a crunch point. There's nothing that your opponents can do against you. But for every moment like this, then you have the after, where you're just trying to drive around, and even though I've taken a turbo on this tank and I've improved my ground resistances with the field mod, I just can't manage to get into the games. And it's even worse that sometimes on maps, you're driving into position, you're too slow to be able to get there. Now that's a feeling that you will have in the TOG, but at least with the TOG, you're kind of a bit of a meme driving around. And at least with the TOG, you've got 1,500 hit points, so once you've actually got into that position, even if people do manage to penetrate your tank, which they will do in a TOG, I feel like you can take a hit a lot better than you can in the A43 BP, especially against artillery. Let me clarify that. This thing does not take artillery shells very well, and it is so frustrating to lose that relatively low 1,000 hit points very quickly indeed to artillery. So next up, we're going to be rolling out on Malinovka once again in a nice matchup, and I've saved you the 2.5 minutes that it took me to drive from there up onto here. Luckily, as I said, this vehicle's power to weight ratio is not the worst, and when you do take the ground resistance improvement from the field mod, you can get into positions. Even gentle slopes, you can kind of keep up to near the top speed limit of that tank. But really, when you're going along the flat and when you're going down, this vehicle ends up feeling super frustrating. So I've got the hill, I've made my bed, and now I'm gonna sleep in it. That's exactly what we're gonna do. And what hopefully this will show you is just what the A43 BP feels like, even when it's outnumbered, and how the armor feels. The Jackson's bouncing a gold round off us. We're going after the Juno. The artillery is gonna hit us now for how much? 194. That's a big old hit of our 1,000 hit points. And I quickly realized that I might want to actually take a hit crossing here, just to be able to get the windmill to protect me more from the self-propelled gunfire. So unfortunately, the T1 Heavy falls to a KV2, who is as of yet unspotted, but that means they have to be right in front of me, huh? And there's a VK301P there, who's coming up on my west, on the right-hand side of my tank where we're facing now. So I make a bit of a misplay there to try and go for the tracks of the Juno. I should have just tried to go for the damage, and unfortunately we're bouncing off the KV1 right now. Luckily we bounced an HE shell from a KV2 The Jackson comes around the corner. We narrowly avoid the artillery shell, but we're going to be stunned for the next few seconds, which is going to slow us down. We've got 4 tanks just going after us right now. And it's like, shall we just hold near the windmill right now? Or shall we reverse to make sure that they can't flank us? It's all about trying to make your opponents afraid of you one by one and just stopping the flanking play. So right now, I'm just going to hard it backwards right now. Angle for the KV-2. Hopefully the artillery misses. Unfortunately, the artillery stuns us for a few more seconds. We're just going to now bait these opponents into our artillery, bait these opponents into the VK, keep reversing to keep our opponents away from us. The VK now giving us some amazing fire support in the side of these tanks, and this damage is starting to add up. Left, right, left, right. I hope the KV-2 misses. 159 damage, which is great for me from a KV-2 because I'm going to be able to put a lot more damage into them. And it's crazy to think that's a KV-2 we're fighting in effectively a Black Prince at tier 6. It's bizarre. So we're up to 2,000 damage now. Really not bad for any tier 6 vehicle. I'm just hoping that we can manage to finish off this KV-2 before they manage to get us. The Hellcat manages to vanquish them. We finish off the Jackson with another shot. And this is turning into quite a spicy game now. This was 2.5 minutes since we reached the top of the hill. To be able to now be at like 3,200 combined. Hopefully we're going to get another shot into this IKV. We do manage to get one more. Are we going to be able to finish them off before they manage to? No, the VK manages to and picks up their 3rd kill of the game. And that was 3,400 combined in quick succession. And from that perspective, that is what the Black Prince feels like. And honestly, I'm not sure if I was getting nice matchmaking, which it might be the case as this is my press account, and my press account seems to get weird like newbie matchmaking occasionally. This tank in a nice matchup feels fun in those close quarters combat all-in situations. From that perspective, this tank is great. However, before all of you go and dump 4,500 gold on this vehicle, I want to give you a bit of a reality check. And that is that sometimes, even when you're in a nice matchup like this against tier 6s and tier 5s, the armor on this tank can be a little bit hit and miss. So when you side scrap like this, it's good. But remember, if they fire gold rounds, they're going to be able to go into your tracks. Notice that the OI there tries to penetrate me with a regular round. They fail, and it doesn't go in. And so I'm going to keep side scraping against this OI. I'm going to load gold, go through their upper hull there. And now we see that the OI is starting to fire gold back at us, which puts their pen up to probably about 200, I think, in the OI. So that's definitely within the realms now where it's a little bit scary. And, ooh, 300 damage. And what do I do now? I want to trade. I want to go around the corner. I want to be aggressive. I want to try and fire multiple times against my opponents. But then you quickly realize that this tank, it doesn't have the alpha damage, and it doesn't even really have the damage per minute. And you don't even really have the armor to be trading like safely against tier 6s. As the OI puts another round into us. This time I'm not sure if that one went through the top of our turret. And suddenly I'm getting owned by a tier 6 tank. And it's because they can control the engagement. I can't shoot them multiple times for every time they manage to hit me, and we lose another chunk of hit points to the 40 TP there. And now I'm just trying to think, like, can I get into this one? I want to be aggressive. I want to trade. I'm like the Black Prince in a matchup like this. We've got to go for it, right? Hopefully we can go after this OI. We're going to side scrape out against them, and we get janked by a heat round. That's not a high pen round. That's like 150 in the side from the KV-1. And oh, kill cam as we go and see how we got shot here. Right through the gap. And you can tell here now that, obviously, if you don't keep your opponents in front of you, and even if you do, with the horrible way that the tracks go over the hull armor of this vehicle, it's not a perfect tank. Sometimes this tank will feel like your best friend when your opponents fire only regular rounds at you and don't really know how to deal with the armor of the tank. It just feels like this all-purpose, super heavy vehicle that you can just angle like this and just pray that they don't manage to go into the areas here, or alternatively, that they don't load gold and just go for your lower plate. But for a lot of you out there who want to have something that you feel that your skill as a player results in you having really good games, I think you'd be crazy to not pick something else. I mean, let's be honest, the M6, the tier 6 American heavy tank, knocks this thing to pieces. So please, please, take it into account that I've been showing you gameplay against tier 5s and tier 6s, and sometimes this thing's armor doesn't even hold up against the tier 6s firing gold rounds. But nevertheless, when it goes well, it really goes well. This was an ace tanker on Malanovka for 1,400 base experience, and we did triple the damage of anyone else on our team. But a shout out to the VK Reaper 69 for coming up on the hill and backing us up. Remember, this is a premium tank. It will make bonus credits, even when you're firing a lot of gold rounds and resupplying consumables. So I guess now it's time for me to come to a conclusion. All in all, what do I think about the A43 BP Prototype? I feel like it's got quite a lot of competition. You can get the Churchill Crocodile for free in the Battle Pass. You could have been able to get the TOG 2 for free from watching my stream over the last few weeks. And so from that perspective, would I recommend dumping 4,500 gold on this vehicle? Probably not. However, on the other hand, if you're the person who really likes mid-tier premium heavy tanks and you're not the most confident of player and you just want to have something that works and makes you feel super powerful in the right situation, then the Black Prince might be the vehicle for you. It really is super simple to play. Just make sure you angle your vehicle like this and just keep firing at your opponents, and you will have more than enough penetration with this very good gun for a tier 6 tank to be able to dispatch them, albeit not quickly with its damage per minute. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was my full tank review on the A43 BP. Really hope you enjoyed this video and it was useful. If it was, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know in the comments down below what you think about the A43 BP. Do you think it looks absolutely trash or do you think it looks really good? And what do you think about the 4,500 gold price tag that this vehicle will have? And also, that it's not included in the Battle Pass. You can just buy this one straight up without having to faff around. Do you think that's a better system or do you think it is a worse system? And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic and hopefully I'll see you soon.